Hoosier fans, we've made it to the middle of September. Week 2 of college football in the books. Week 1 of the NFL is in the books. Hopefully your team is 1-0 or 0-0. You tied? Undefeated. All right. Like all I'm saying is Hoosier fans. IU football had some problems on Saturday. It wasn't good for a while. The season almost slipped out of the hands of this team. But the good news is Indiana did figure things out in the second half, beat Idaho by double digits. We're going to talk a lot of football, but first, we're going to take a quick look at the Indiana men's basketball schedule that was released back on Thursday. We had non-conference. We'll dive into the conference slate. What do we like? What do we hate? And so much more here on episode 263 of the Hoosier Sound, where we are the official podcast of Indiana HQ. We're recording this edition of the Hoosier Sound on Monday, September 12th, 2022, where I am your host, Nathan Krishnan. Here with me tonight is our normal co-host, Matt Lukens, and our newest team member on Indiana HQ, Charlie Mason. Guys, the IU basketball schedule is finally here. And Indiana, we knew they were going to play Xavier, and we knew they were going to play Arizona, and North Carolina was on there, and Kansas was on there. But now we have the opponents and the arrangement of those opponents, dates, and all of that available to us, every single one of the 31 men's basketball games that Indiana will play this season, in the most anticipated season of the Mike Woodson era. The entire schedule is here. Now, as we had mentioned on Indiana HQ early on Thursday, before the schedule came out, we were looking for three things. The first thing we were looking for is, what are the two matchups that Indiana will have in December in the middle of that Arizona, North Carolina, Kansas gauntlet? Second question we were looking at is, how will the other Big Ten contenders fit in the schedule? Will they be in the early part of the schedule? Will they be in the later piece of the schedule? That question was answered. And then the final thing we wanted to know is, what were the last couple of games going to look like? Who is the senior day opponent going to be? How important and which opponents will Indiana face in the last game or two? We got that answer as well. Matt, I'm going to throw it over to you first. The big news, as far as I'm concerned on the schedule, is that in the December portion, those first two games, Indiana will go to Rutgers and host Nebraska. That means the 5-game stretch will be Indiana hosting North Carolina, going to Rutgers, and then hosting Nebraska, then neutral against Arizona, and then going to Kansas to face the Jayhawks. Matt, talk to me. Oh man, this is one heck of a December slate. How do you feel? How do you feel knowing now Indiana's playing Rutgers and Nebraska in that early part?
Yeah, I mean, this is about as tough as of a December slate as I've seen since becoming an IU fan and covering IU for the Hoosier Sound. However, I'm going to argue with you. I don't think that's the biggest news.
Oh,
I think the biggest news out of the schedule release is that we're back ending the schedule and having a gauntlet at the end. Man. Michigan, Northwestern, Illinois, Michigan State, Purdue, Iowa, Michigan to end the season. That's bigger news to me. Why? Because usually the Big Ten wants to set up their best teams to play each other right going into March. Those last couple of weeks is when you get the biggest numbers on national TV. There's no football to be conflict of interest there. It's literally, this is the marquee. All eyes are on college basketball. Nobody's watching the NBA at this point because it's just leading up into playoffs and people are resting you know, all eyes are on college basketball at this point in time, and especially on the Big Ten, because it's always been historically such a close and tough conference with some really big brands. So the fact that IU is playing all these teams at the end really speaks volumes to how much the rest of the conference really respects and believes in IU to be a top team contending this year. I think we've all been telling you that here on the Hoosier Sound for the last couple of months, that, look, this team is going to be legit. They got a couple holes to fill. There's some issues, but if those get filled, like, we're looking at a possible title contender here. And I think with this schedule release, I think the Big Ten also believes that as well.
Yeah, Charlie, the home Big Ten openers against Nebraska on December 7th. The first couple of Big Ten games in January are Indiana going to Iowa and then hosting Northwestern. And as Matt mentioned, you have that killer conclusion to the slate. You have a road game at Ann Arbor and Chrysler Arena, and then Illinois and Michigan State. And as Matt mentioned, ending with Purdue and Michigan as well, with Iowa in there. What stands out to you in the schedule? Are you more interested in what happens at the start of the Big Ten slate or what happens at the end?
Oh, absolutely. The end. 100%. I think the beginning of the season is, I think the term cakewalk doesn't apply to everything. I don't want to use it here, but I think we're as close as cakewalk comes to starting off very strong. I think IU has a very good shot at coming out at least to the beginning of December as an undefeated team. I mean, North Carolina is on the verge November 30th, but I think they have a really good shot at setting themselves up for success leading into the latter half of the season. I don't know though, that it's going to be a marathon going into March Madness.
Every basketball season's a marathon. It really is. And it's quite a schedule we have here. Another thing I noticed, Nathan, by the way, sorry to interrupt Charlie, but another thing I noticed is that we got a nice break. The boys get to go home for Christmas and New Year's. We don't play a game. December 23rd is our last home game. It's Kennesaw State. Then they'll be able to go home. Our next game after the 23rd is until January 5th away at Iowa.
Yeah.
So the guys actually get a nice Christmas vacation this year, which is not normally the case, right? Normally we play somebody December 28th or December 27th. So they have to come back to campus on the 26th. But these guys get to go home. That's actually going to be really good for team morale, I think, as well. You're going to see these guys come back, maybe a little bit rusty for the Iowa game. But later on in the season, I think that pays dividends, right? Because such a long season, like, again, it's a marathon, right? And these guys, they miss Christmas, they miss their family. Like, there's so much stuff going on, but the fact that they get to go back and live a little bit of their lives again outside of basketball there for that little stretch is, I think, going to be very meaningful come late February.
Yeah, especially coming off that stretch.
Oh,
yes. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because that's the Kennesaw State game. Yeah, is after Elon, which is directly after Kansas. So they get two games after that stretch we talked about, the North Carolina to the Kansas game. They get two cupcakes. We will say cupcakes, and then they get to go eat their cupcakes for Christmas with their family, then come back for Iowa
holiday desserts and chocolate cookies and all that. But
whatever they celebrate.
You got some Big Ten games coming up. So you got to be careful. But as I see this, right, I think the most underrated aspect of the way the schedule came out is I look at Indiana's Big Ten games. I see a 6-0 start in conference play. And, if you can get fat early, then all of a sudden, the middle and the end of your schedule, you can help yourself out. It's interesting because I think the soft spot in the middle of IU's overall schedule and the start of the Big Ten schedule means that after Arizona and after North Carolina and after Kansas and after Rutgers and after Nebraska, Indiana has some time, you guys mentioned, with those two non-conference games, and then with some softer matchups early in Big Ten play to make those critical adjustments. Hey, did we realize we have to put in more shooters? Well, hey, you know what? These 8 games in between Elon and Wisconsin, those games Indiana can use in order to make those tweaks. Hey, Anthony Leal, here's a little more playing time for you. Hey, CJ Gunn, here's a little more playing time for you. Or actually, you know what? Hey, maybe Indiana needs to mix up the guards in their starting lineup. Maybe they bring Jalen Hood-Schifino off the bench or, something like that. And hey, God forbid anyone gets hurt. You have a soft spot in the middle here late December, early January, where you can figure things out. I said 8-game stretch, I meant 6. But the other piece of this that I can't wait to find out is right now, there's an anticipation of who the main contenders are in the Big Ten. It's Indiana, but also Illinois and Purdue and Michigan State, maybe Ohio State. The question to me,
You really threw Purdue in there, didn't you?
oh, they're in the mix. The question to me is, of the rest of those teams, who becomes prickly? Who becomes a thorn in the side? Is it Iowa? Because then all of a sudden that first Big Ten game, and not as easy as you may think, because you're going to Iowa City. Is it Northwestern? Is it Penn State? Is it Minnesota? Is it Wisconsin? No one's talking about Wisconsin. No one ever talks about Wisconsin, and then they end up 10 and or 12 and 8 in Big Ten play. So once we figured that stuff out, I'll be curious to see how this plays out. But I'm just going to ask both of you this question. Early read, do you see this as a schedule with 20 wins on it? How about 22, 24, 26? Matt, your immediate instinct reaction, roughly, do you see this as a 20, 22, 24 win schedule? How do you look at it?
21.
Oh,
21
okay.
win schedule. I think there's 20 wins in there for sure. I think going into Big Ten conference schedule, they will, or at least even to start the season, I believe they'll be 6-0 to start the North Carolina game.
That's
yeah.
Okay,
And so that's 6 to start. And I think that's at least another 13, 14 in conference. And then they're gonna find wins, other places, right? I think they'll win one of the North Carolina, Kansas, Arizona games.
They get one of those.
I think so. I think they're gonna win some games in the tournament, and then the Big Ten tournament. I think they'll find wins elsewhere. So I like this team to win around 20 to 21 games. Now I don't think they're gonna win 28, 26, 27, right? And they're not going undefeated. They're not going to be 1 or 2 loss team, right? I think this team has flaws, and teams that have flaws will just randomly drop games to teams that are worse than them because, well, they're just not playing well that night, right? They're we're not a Duke. We're not built to tank teams, and even when we're not playing well, we can still win. I think this team is going to go through some ups and downs throughout the season, but hopefully they're, like I said, due to some nice scheduling breaks and just overall belief in the team that they're peaking at the right time in March.
Yeah, and as I look at this, when we publish the schedule over on our Twitter page at Indiana HQ, you can go over to the IU men's basketball page and see it for yourself. We had some responses to our tweet. Justin sees 21 wins just like you, Matt. Hey, Corey Snyder sees 24 on the schedule, and I'm somewhere in between. I see kind of 23 at the moment. We'll see how this plays out. Charlie, are you more optimistic or pessimistic than the both of us?
I think I'm going to take the optimistic side. I'm seeing at least 23 wins, maybe 25. Yeah. I want to believe that IU has the ability to win over 23 games. Like you said, they're streaky. They can be streaky on and off. There are going to be periods where they'll go like 10-0, and then obviously I could see them dropping 4 games in a row. That's how basketball works. That's how IU works sometimes.
Yep.
But honestly, looking at the schedule, looking at the opponents, the dates, where they're playing, I really see a lot of matchups that favor IU. So I think it's going to be an interesting season. I think they'll pull off a couple wins that they shouldn't walk away with. And I don't know. We just got to remember that other teams are going through super tough schedules as well. They have unfortunate slates. So looking at IU's schedule alone might not be enough. That being said, from what I'm seeing, I like it.
Yeah, same here. And I think that's a good point you made there about, hey, other teams have tough schedules too. I talked about how hey, which one of the non-contenders will step up? Hey, you know that means someone in the top 6 is going to slip, right? We don't know who that's going to be. Who's going to, Michigan State's got a really tough
It's
non-conference schedule. How does Purdue deal with the departures of Jaden Ivey and Sasha Stefanovic? Illinois doesn't have Kofi Coburn anymore. Hey, it's gonna be fascinating to see how it all develops. Of course, we'll be right here on the Hoosier Sound and over at Indiana HQ with you every step of the way as we get into preseason practice and Hoosier hysteria, and then the season opener that comes your way on November 7th, a Monday night season opener at home against Morehead State, and the 2 exhibitions that precede that as well. None of us can wait until the start of Indiana's men's basketball season. So now that
the
we
Big
wrapped
Ten,
up,
Big Ten, I will say Indiana football made sure that none of us are not looking forward to basketball season.
Hey, all I'm saying is, regardless of how you feel about this football team, they are 2-0. And it's a natural transition to the Indiana victory over the Idaho Vandals on Saturday night. But it wasn't pretty, folks. And Tom Allen admitted that himself. The Hoosiers won 35-22 after trailing 10-0 at halftime to the Idaho Vandals in a bit of a sloppy, rainy Saturday night affair against an FCS team. Indiana eventually got the job done thanks to the ground game from Sean Shivers. He saw Connor Bazelak and DJ Matthews connect for a touchdown. AJ Barner made a play to help the Hoosiers in the second half. But Charlie, you were there, man. And let's face it, after all the goodwill Indiana built up after the Illinois win, they took a step back against Idaho, didn't they? Do you disagree?
Absolutely. Watching the first half was difficult. Being in the stadium, let's just put it this way. There were around, I don't think it was a little less than 20,000 people at the start of the game. At halftime, that number dropped by over 65% at least, that 10-0 Idaho lead. But the energy, the atmosphere, everything seemed wrong until it was right. It was so strange to watch. That I'll say this. IU football is the most interesting team. It's the most fun team to watch in college football right
welcome
now.
to the chaos, Charlie.
Yes, welcome to what it is to be the Indiana football fan.
Let me push it a little more, Charlie. You saw this team from the press box against Illinois. And then you saw them, the same roster with the exception of Matthew Bedford against Idaho. What changed?
Do you mean what changed for their first half performance or their second half? It's 2 different teams.
Let's start with the first half. What was different in the first half? Whether it's the sideline, whether it's the execution on the field. You had the perfect vantage point. What was different?
I think it had to do with a lot of the IU not using the time that they were given. They ran a lot of no huddle in the first half. Something wasn't working. Bazelak wasn't making plays that he should have. And if it wasn't his fault, it was definitely a wide receiver's fault. Honestly, I think it was probably a little bit of the offensive coordinator's fault. But every time he'd come back on the sidelines, he wouldn't go up to a coach. Instead, he'd sit down on the bench and just stare and watch his defense essentially carry him for what seemed like 35 minutes. But it was difficult to watch a team that did so well in the last 2 minutes against Illinois start in such a disappointing fashion. I
hear what you're saying. And look, hey, in hindsight, that win over Illinois looks even more impressive now, the way Illinois whooped Virginia over the weekend. Of course, the weather was drastically different than it was in that first game against Illinois. That won't be a concern against Western Kentucky in week 3 as we look ahead. Matt, much like I did, we had a big screen television point of view watching this game. What was wrong here? Where do you begin as far as Indiana's first half problems against Idaho? We'll get to the second half. They did figure some things out, but that first half was really discouraging to watch.
Yeah, it was. In my time watching IU football and all the years that I've been doing this podcast, I've had some very unique viewer experiences. Traveling for 30 hours to get home to have to watch that first half made me want to get back on another 16-hour flight. That was really hard to watch. Now, Charlie brought up that Bazelak would come off the field and sit down on the bench, not talk to the coaches. That to me is body language of frustration, right? Because when you're trying to win a game, right, and you're not frustrated, right, you're going to try and like talk things out, right? But that's just pure, unadulterated frustration from our quarterback, right? And you know what? I respect that. I would have rage quit too. I would have been tilted out of my mind after watching a lot of what happened in the first half. There was not much he could do behind that offensive line. They were getting no push. The running game wasn't working. Passing game wasn't working. Nobody was running the correct routes. It was hard to watch. We talked about the offensive coordinator, right? Possibly being at fault for the issues. And I think that is true, but we also have to give credit where credit is due. And the second half was much better, right? Second half adjustments. There's something I've griped about on this podcast for about as long as it has existed, by the way, that we always get out adjusted in the second half. There's the other coaching staff always out adjusts. Figures out. Figures out, throws in a curveball, and all of a sudden we just get punched in the face and get knocked down, and we can't recover. Right? And it's a TKO by the end of the third quarter. This team very much could have just packed it. No, only 5,000 people are left in the crowd. Yeah. It doesn't matter. Nobody's seeing this. Nobody's watching this. Everybody wanted to rip their eyeballs out in the first half, so they're not watching it in the second half, right? They could have shipped it, but they came back and won. And by the way, Idaho did this to Washington State, who, by the way, also went in and just happened to beat Wisconsin this weekend. Yeah. So maybe this Idaho team isn't as bad as we thought they were coming into the game. So I'm going to hold my judgments on this team as I have to run here in a bit. Yeah. But I will hold my judgments on the team until next weekend. This weekend will be my final judgment on the team, and then I will know where they are at, because this Western Kentucky team's not great, but not bad. Well, so if we can have a better performance against them, I'm going to start to feel a little bit more confident in that this team can win more than 3 games, like I tweeted on Saturday after watching the first half.
Well, let me get right back to you here, Matt. Tom Allen did say it wasn't really an effort thing. It was more of a focus thing in his press conference earlier today, after he had a day or two to sit on it. But make no mistake about it, the reason we're harping on the first half here is because Tom Allen was not in a celebratory mood after Indiana won on Saturday. He was very frustrated. He was very unsure as to why his team played that way. And he made the point to say, it's no insult to Idaho, but we should have been way more in the first half. We should have played in the third quarter like we played in the first quarter. Yeah. And the one thing I've learned by doing this podcast, Matt, you talked about what you learned. One thing I learned on this podcast is, the result isn't the only thing that matters. It's not just, how the sausage gets made is more important than the end result. And so as I look at this team, I say, shoot, you had the rough third quarter against Illinois. Mostly the fourth quarter was tough to watch against Illinois. Brutal first half against Idaho. I guess the result is you're 2-0. Matt, I'm going to turn this to you really quickly here. The second half was better. There were no drastic changes. You did not see Jack Tuttle in the game. You did not see changes on the offensive line until garbage time. It got better in the second half. Was there one particular thing that you saw that you were glad Indiana went to more in the second half?
Running the ball.
Yeah. Effectively, right?
Effectively, yes. Thank God. Executing at a high level in the run game. I would say that would be the scientific answer for what happened.
Is there anything sustainable from that? Is there anything they can take from that second half and move going forward?
Here's the bad news. Absolutely not. Because Idaho is going to be the worst running defense we will see for the rest of the year. Okay. It's not their fault. Right? They have to work with the players that they can get in recruiting. But the natural talent of Idaho is nowhere near the natural talent of a Michigan State, an Ohio State, or a Michigan. I'm sorry, it's not. So and the level of execution in those teams compared to Idaho is on and it's from here to the moon. Okay, like there's the sizable gap is ridiculous. So IU is going to have to figure out what they did in that second half, how they executed, what was working, and then multiply that by 100-fold, and they might get 50 yards rushing against Michigan State.
Ooh. Matt, final thing before you hop off your Indiana, Western Kentucky on Saturday. Hoosiers are a 6-point favorite. Vegas has it 33-27 Indiana. Who wins and by how much?
Indiana 31, Western Kentucky 28. There you go, right here, folks.
So White Knuckler will be up until 3:15 or 3:30 on Saturday afternoon then, I guess. All right. Matt, thanks for hopping on. We'll see you next week. Charlie and I will take you home here the rest of the way on Idaho and into Western Kentucky. Charlie, again, in person, the second half was there. I thought it was funny. Tom Allen post-game comment. He told the guys, hey, we got to execute better. Bottom line, he's going to lay into them, but they just got to play football. And you saw the team play the football they were supposed to play in the first half. How encouraging was it to see Indiana play better after halftime to the point where they did win the game comfortably?
Here's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing Tom Allen, a coach who I have a lot of respect for, come in to okay, here's how it is. Last game against Illinois, Tom Allen tells Bazelak on the final drive, score. Do what you have to, score.
Yeah.
Halftime of the Idaho game, he tells the boys, hey, just play football. So I don't know if losing structure in the game plan is a good idea, but it's what's working for the Hoosiers right now. And all I can say is that as soon as Tom Allen started talking, he didn't take any questions for the first 2 minutes. He looked down at the microphone, whispered into it, and there were a couple quotes I want to say out. He said, well, we should have been up multiple scores in the first half. That's one of them. He said it's not acceptable, too many mistakes, very frustrating night, but we found a way to win the game. Can't start playing until halftime. We stopped ourselves the whole first half. And all that he could take away, the only positive he could take away was that they won. That was it. And honestly, I'm kind of on his side. Yeah. I think that the Matt made a couple good points that this IU run game hasn't been established. We definitely saw more of it. Yeah. Shivers got that career high, which was awesome. Good for him. Henderson got that touchdown. Great. That's what we wanted to see. Yeah. Just not in the third quarter after a terrible first half. We wanted to see that in the first 10 minutes. But I will say, and I will repeat what Connor Bazelak said. When IU's offense is good, they are really good. And I think it goes both ways. The offense and the defense in 6 minutes. I'm going to read what happened in 6 minutes.
Let's go. Can't wait.
Touchdown with 10 minutes and 32 seconds remaining in the third quarter. 2 minutes later, actually less than a minute later, safety. That's plus 2 points. That's 9 points at 9:56.
I'll do the math. Yeah.
8:41. Yeah. Touchdown.
16
points. 4:46 touchdown.
23.
That's 23 points in 6 minutes in the third quarter. How that doesn't happen after you're losing 10-0 after 30 minutes of playing the same team. I've never seen it. IU's all over the place. They're going for it on fourth down and getting it in the first half and then not getting it in the second half. They're going for two twice.
Yeah.
Both teams. Idaho kind of needed to, but I don't know if Tom Allen needed to make the play call. 2 points.
I could maybe see an argument there as far as, hey, you're trying to get some 2-point work in. Hey, better to figure out what works and what doesn't against Idaho than before your Western Kentuckys and your Cincinnatis and your Nebraskas. But hey, look, Indiana did do something that a lot of other 20, 25-point favorites on Saturday did not do, right? Looking at you, Notre Dame, looking at you, Texas A&M, looking at you, Wisconsin, looking at you, Nebraska. Indiana won. All right, Indiana won. And I know that was a little bit of a blindside hit to Charlie over there, but look, Indiana did win, and when it's all said and done, they won by 12, and they had a bigger lead earlier in the game in the second half. And hey, Tom Allen admitted there's a lot to fix, a lot to improve on, a lot to get better at, and at the end of the day, you're better off doing it when you're 2-0 compared to 1-1, especially with the loss to Idaho, or even worse, an 0-2 start had you lost to the Fighting Illini. But there's more coming here on Indiana's win over Idaho, as well as looking ahead to Western Kentucky. First, it's time for Who Won the Week this past week in IU sports, and a lot of worthy candidates. We're going to keep it in-house, though. How about we shout out both soccer teams? Indiana men's soccer with a 2-0 win over number 9 Akron on Friday. The Hoosiers have had a bit of a shaky start to their season. I thought it was unfair that they were kicked out of the top 25 based on the start of their schedule, but the Hoosiers knocked off Akron 2-0. It was wonderful to see the atmosphere at Armstrong Stadium. No surprise that the fans came out for that one. I'll say it once, and I've said it once, and I'll say it again. Attending an Indiana men's soccer match, especially a high-profile one, is arguably the best sporting experience at Indiana. Sam Sarver and Nate Ward scored for the Hoosiers. Indiana dominated. This was not a fluky win. They outshot Akron 19-4. It was great to see the players and Todd Yeagley really fired up in the locker room after the game. Indiana men's soccer posted a video after the game there. So the Hoosiers knock off Akron 2-0. Great to see that. Also, the women's soccer team keeps this ridiculous streak alive where through 6 games they have not allowed a goal yet. They had a 0-0 result over the course of this last weekend, but it's absurd that this Indiana team has had 1 win and 5 draws through 6 games, and they still haven't conceded. It's an unbelievable defensive streak right now for the IU women's soccer team. I can't wait to see them keep it up. Make sure you go watch both the men's and women's soccer teams play. Field hockey had a great weekend too. Also an outstanding sporting experience on campus at Indiana University. If you'd like to subscribe to our podcast for free, all you have to do is search for The Hoosier Sound wherever you listen to podcasts. Stay up to date with all of our information by following us on Twitter at Indiana HQ and at The Hoosier Sound. And this part is important. If you enjoy our show, leave us a review, tell a friend, share our links. That kind of support really helps us grow this podcast and reach more passionate IU fans such as yourself. All right, Charlie, we've gone long enough on this podcast without talking about Deshawn Mccullough, the true freshman jack of all trades, linebacker, pass rusher, defensive lineman, decent coverage player. I mean, true freshmen aren't supposed to do this at the Division I level. He single-handedly stood out among the juniors and the seniors on his defense. Deshawn Mccullough, Charlie, he's someone that I think is a key piece of this Indiana defense in his first year.
I think he's transitioning very well. I actually have a friend who played football. Their school played football against him last year, and when they were trying to describe him, they used the words, "Oh, he was the guy that destroyed us. He was the guy that demolished us," and they were like, "Oh yeah, him, yeah." So I think he's transitioning nicely into this defense, working well with Casey and Cam Jones.
Yep.
I think he fits in perfectly. It was 2 sacks, 5 tackles.
Ooh,
it was incredible to watch. Up in the press box, they were all like, "Oh, who's number 0? Who's number 0? Who is this kid?" It was really something special to watch. I mean, his energy, his enthusiasm after every tackle was just, I think he's already one of the keys to the defense, but I think he's going to play an even bigger role. He has to in the next couple of seasons.
Man, it's amazing. It's rare to see a true freshman make this kind of impact this early. You can say all you want about the fact, yeah, he's a 4-star recruit, one of the most prized recruits to come through at Indiana University. I believe it's the highest rated recruit in the 24/7 sports era. Still, I mean, you've seen high ranked wide receivers come through Indiana. You've seen high-ranked, players at various positions, running backs, et cetera, come through and not make this immediate splash. And it happens all across America. Deshawn McCullough, he's doing just that. And for him to make this kind of impact, it's going to be interesting to see how Tom Allen handles McCullough's snaps and his usage going forward. I thought it was interesting. Allen mentioned after the game that McCullough's a key player and focused as far as practice is concerned. He's not just showing up on Saturdays. He's locked in during the week as well. And I can't wait to see how this plays out with Deshawn McCullough. Look, Indiana needs some players to play better than expected here, especially with the Big Ten being as difficult as it is. And if Deshawn McCullough can really unlock some of that potential in his first season, we really have something cooking. So I can't wait to see how this plays out for Deshawn over the course of the rest of the season. Charlie, as we wrap up our Idaho thoughts here, whether it's offense or defense, anything else stand out to you? Hey, bottom line, Indiana did get the job done. It's not going to look great in all the analytics and the computer rankings, but hey, 2-0 is 2-0.
Yeah. I'd just like to add, I actually had the opportunity to talk to Campbell, the kicker.
Yep, Charlie Campbell. Yep.
Yeah. But after the Illinois game. And he seemed very confident in terms of his ability to kick the ball because he had those guys in front of him. I talked about the was it the LSU game where the field goal?
Yeah, LSU Florida State. Yeah.
I brought that up to him and he was like, yeah, that's super unfortunate. Luckily, I've got those guys in front of me, but they weren't the problem this week. It was, let's put it on the rain and check back in a week, but I'm looking at him right now. I think he can definitely be a leader on this team. I think he's got to do his part, do his job, and I think he just got to get refocused. That's the one big takeaway that I think we need to look at there are obviously so many takeaways to take away from this Idaho game, but
that was the most fascinating game against an FCS opponent I've ever seen.
Ever. But I think Campbell's got it. He's a big part of this. I think he knows that, and he says he's given a few opportunities and he's got to make them count. And I think he's right.
Yeah, looking forward to seeing Charlie Campbell bounce back here. He deserves the benefit of the doubt after the way he's kicked the last couple of years. Hey, if Matt's prediction is right, we're going to need a couple of key kicks this game on Saturday against the Western Kentucky Hilltoppers out of the Conference USA. They visit Bloomington on Saturday at noon Eastern on Big Ten Network. It is not an exclusive Big Ten Network game, so we're going to have that practice again like we had on Saturday. Make sure you find the game in your area on BTN. Indiana is hosting the Western Kentucky Hilltoppers. These two teams played each other last year, and Indiana won 33-31 in Bowling Green. Weird game, crazy game. Yet, you look ahead to this matchup on Saturday, Indiana is just a 6-point favorite. The over-under is 60. As I mentioned to Matt earlier, the sportsbooks had this one at 33-27, projected as an Indiana victory. Western Kentucky was picked third in the preseason Conference USA poll behind UTSA, Texas San Antonio, and UAB in that league. This is not the official name for this game on Saturday, but I think informally we can call it the Christian Lander Cup. They are coached, the Hilltoppers are coached by Tyson Helton. He's the brother of Clay Helton, who used to be the USC coach. Now he's the Georgia Southern head coach, as he ended Scott Frost's tenure on Saturday. Tyson Helton, offensive background. The Hilltoppers are currently 2-0 with unimpressive wins against Austin Peay and Hawaii to start this season. Charlie, this is a team with a lot of offensive firepower. Their quarterback is a Division II transfer who's not afraid to throw the football. Malachi Corley and Dawood Davis are NFL prospects at wide receiver. If you ask me, one of the big matchups is Indiana's secondary against this passing game. How do you see that play out on Saturday?
I'm scared. I'm going to be honest with you. I think that Western Kentucky's offensive weapons out-edge what Indiana's secondary has to offer. We saw a little bit of it in the Idaho game. The speed of the secondary is really what we're looking at. Just we can't match with the super quick wide receivers. And what's even worse is the tackling. Forget the speed. If they're in front of us, if they're in front of IU, they can't get them down. For some reason, there was like a 47-yard catch and run by Idaho. Just simple mistakes that I think WKU will find a way to exploit this Saturday. So it's gonna be interesting for sure.
It will, and Tom Allen said as much. There's a team in Western Kentucky that plays with a lot of tempo. The way they stretch you laterally, vertically. It is interesting that their offensive coordinator from last season, their passing game coordinator from last season, Zach Kitley, moved on from Western Kentucky in the offseason. He is now an offensive coordinator for Texas Tech. And so far, Texas Tech has not had a problem scoring points. They dropped 63 in week 1 against Murray State. They dropped 33 against Houston in a win over the top 25 Houston football. So I think the Cougars in Lubbock on Saturday. Again, 93 points in 2 games. As you see, that Western Kentucky offense translate pretty well to the Big 12. Their quarterback from last year, Bailey Zappi, is gone. Their top receiver from last year, Jared Stearns, moved on to the NFL. Their second wide receiver, Mitchell Tinsley, transferred to Penn State and is someone Indiana will see later this season. Their top defensive player, D'Angelo Malone, went to the NFL. Yet this Western Kentucky team still has a lot of firepower. They don't run the ball that much, but when they do, the majority of the carries go to running back Davion Irvin Poindexter, who used to be an Indiana running back last couple of years. Irvin Poindexter gets the majority of the carries, so it'll be an interesting homecoming for him. Western Kentucky also has some decent players across the field here with center Rusty Stats, defensive end Jawan Jones, a couple of good players in their secondary, Khalif Hilassi, as well as safety AJ Braithwaite. I think Indiana's secondary will do a sufficient job against this passing game. But here's the deal, Charlie. Indiana cannot start in a 10-0 deficit, and they cannot have a huge second half lull like they did against Illinois. Western Kentucky will eat you alive, because here's the deal, folks. While I may have said early on, Western Kentucky had a couple of unimpressive wins to start the season, this is a group of 5 team that is going to be licking their chops, going to a Power 5 venue. Didn't you see enough of that last weekend? I mean, these teams are getting better and better and better. I can't prove this to you in numerical, quantitative fashion, but it feels like the gap between the group of 5 and the Power 5, excluding Alabama and Clemson and Georgia, that type of stuff. Group of 5, Power 5 is getting narrower and narrower and narrower. It's a 6-point spread. And remember, Western Kentucky is going to be licking their chops. So I know Indiana didn't lose last week, but they have to play almost with that chip on their shoulder, like they have played poorly thus far to this point. And we need to see this Indiana team maximize everything on the field here for them to come out 3-0. Charlie, the good news for IU is that Western Kentucky's defense isn't the level of Illinois', and it isn't the level of what we'll see in the Big Ten. With that said, how are you looking to see Indiana's offense attack this Western Kentucky team? And what are a couple of Hoosiers you're looking to stand out on the offensive side?
I'm thinking that Shivers has to step up again.
Yeah.
I don't know in what fashion that's going to be, even if it's just giving Bazelak some protection. Because I don't think that this is the game for IU to try things. Idaho was
time, yeah.
Idaho end of the 3rd quarter, beginning of the 4th quarter. Like we said, Tom Allen calls those 2-point conversions. They don't work. He goes for it on 4th. That doesn't work. I don't think this is a time that IU can be experimental with their run game.
Right.
I don't think that it's the time to stop the long game. What I mean is, I think that IU's got some wide receivers that can really, really run with it. I mean, we talked about actually, I didn't talk about, but Tom Allen.
We know about Cam Camper and DJ Matthews, right?
Oh, DJ Matthews. Let me just start with him. I think he's the key. I think he's the key to the IU offense. Honestly, he was incredible against Idaho. First half aside, he really stepped up in the second half, was able to fire up the team. I think that with his catch and run abilities and his route running, that he's going to give this Western Kentucky secondary some trouble. I think that the long ball, Connor Bazelak to Cam Camper and DJ Matthews is what's going to get IU through this. So I'm looking at those four: Shivers, Bazelak. Then again, I'm looking at the two wide receivers, Cam Camper and DJ Matthews. Obviously, I want to see Deshawn McCullough step up again. That would be really big because the defense is kind of the lifeblood of this team.
Oh, absolutely. Especially with Tom Allen calling the shots on the defensive side of the ball. Hey, I'm curious still, even going into Saturday, who steps up as a third wide receiver? Is it going to be Donovan McCulley? Is it going to be Malachi Holt-Bennett, Anderson Kobe, Javon Swinton? Just some of the names in the mix there. Who's going to step up there and really grab that wide receiver 3 spot by the horns? I thought Tom Allen's comments earlier today were interesting as far as the offensive line is concerned. He did mention he thought Parker Hanna did a nice job in place of Matthew Bedford on Saturday. And he understands that it was a rough start, but he feels like the offensive line responded well, ended up running for 239 yards on 6.6 yards per carry. And Tom Allen did understand, hey, we're going to face bigger, more athletic groups coming up here over the next few weeks. The offensive line is to continue to gel and mesh and work together. And so that's what Tom Allen felt as far as this offensive line is concerned. I totally agree with you as far as the key pieces on this IU offense. I'm really looking forward to seeing Shaun Shivers and Josh Henderson really break off explosive runs against Western Kentucky. I look at this Hilltopper defense, and I see that Austin P in the FCS ran for 171 yards against Western Kentucky in their week 0 matchup. Yes, it did come on about 40-ish carries, 40 plus carries. But at the end of the day, that Austin P was that comfortable just pounding away on the ground and still going for 156 yards through the air on 22 attempts. I look at that and I say, oh, geez, okay. I mean, if Austin P can put up 330 yards of offense against these guys, then Indiana can certainly do much more than that. I'm looking to see over 450 yards of offense against Western Kentucky. And if Indiana thinks that's too ambitious, boy, just wait until Big Ten play. As I look at Hawaii, even in week 1, it was Western Kentucky's second game. Hawaii ended up throwing for 266 yards on 44 attempts, and they ended up running for 94 yards on about 30 attempts on the ground. Hawaii, though, has had a very difficult season here, arguably one of the worst FBS teams in all of college football. Plenty of ways to attack this defense. I'm looking forward to seeing the guys you mentioned, Charlie, step up. I'm going to keep my eyes up for AJ Barner. I'm really looking forward to seeing Indiana's defensive line overwhelm Western Kentucky in the trenches. Western Kentucky center, Rusty Stats, pretty good. The rest of them, though, should be overwhelmed by Indiana's group of defensive linemen. We talked about Bo Robbins. We'll see if James Head is available this weekend. Big CEO, Ladarius Cox, a number of other Hoosiers up front, Bo Robbins, Deshawn McCullough. We'll see if they can really get that push inside against the Western Kentucky Hilltoppers. We're going to give you a prediction in just a moment, but first it's time for a social media shout out. I just had to mention Indiana men's basketball on their official Twitter account posted an absolutely hilarious video montage of Mike Woodson throwback to his playing days. And all I have to say is only about 45 seconds long to a minute long. Man, the entire time I was watching that, I was impressed at the former Indiana Hoosier player, Mike Woodson, now, of course, the head men's basketball coach at Indiana University, is showing a lot of skill there, Charlie. I don't know if you knew Mike Woodson was that good, but my God, it was great to see the little throwback footage there. I think we should see more of that, don't you?
Oh, absolutely.
Just get more just get more footage of coaches playing basketball. I think that's the bottom line here. Indiana men's basketball, you can follow them at Indiana MBB if you have not already. You can also follow us all across social media. You can find us on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube at Indiana HQ and at the Hoosier Sound. On Instagram, we're not Indiana HQ, but we're Indiana.HQ. And give us a follow if you haven't yet. If you have, tell a friend, tell a neighbor, tell a stranger. It doesn't really matter. As long as they like IU sports, make sure you tell them to follow us and find us on social media. Charlie, you're going to be there on Saturday, noon Eastern kick, Saturday afternoon. Tom Allen, by the way, did mention he's looking forward to this noon kickoff. He did mention in a not so serious fashion, but in an honest way that yes, you know, the late kickoffs, especially the one like Saturday night where the game was pushed back at the start, it does lead to a long day for the players. So he's looking forward to seeing a noon kick on Saturday. It's going to be nice outside. All forecasts right now project sunlight full from noon to 3, from warmups to the end of the ball game on Saturday afternoon. I'm gonna ask you, Charlie, 6-point favorites are the Hoosiers. Do they get the win? And if so, by how much?
I'm going to be real optimistic.
Whoa.
24-10.
Wow.
Hoosiers.
Take the under.
I mean, big margin, man. Big margin.
You got Indiana winning by 14. You like Connor Bazelak. You like Cam Camper, DJ Matthews, to get the job done. Hey, I'll tell you, if Indiana wins by 2 scores, that'll be a really nice, positive result going into that Cincinnati game in a couple of weeks, in a week and a half. By the way, the time did come out for that game. It's going to be either 3:30 p.m. or 4 p.m. Eastern start against the Cincinnati Bearcats on Saturday, September 24th. That game will be either on ESPN2 or ESPNU. As I look at this game, I do have Indiana winning. I think Indiana will come out with a win over the Hilltoppers. I also think this game leans more towards the under once again. I do think Indiana will struggle to get to 30, though. So I have Indiana winning this one 27-23. Indiana gets the job done. Close game again. You know, yes, I guess that does mean West Kentucky covers the 6. I don't think Indiana will play as fast as they did as they have done the first 2 games of the season. And I'm expecting Indiana to continue focusing on improving their running game and focusing on getting the most out of their passing game. I don't think Tom Allen likes the incomplete passes right now at Connor Bazelak's ledger, even if that means you're playing faster and you're doing what you even if it feels right to throw the ball in a certain situation. I don't think Tom Allen will like his quarterback going, I think it was 6 for 17 in the first half, rain or shine. So I do have Indiana winning 27-23. Now, we did ask over on the Hoosier Sound Twitter account, our weekly podcast poll question, which was, based on what you've seen so far, have we seen Indiana's best football yet? And I think it's an interesting question because there were certain stretches of play against Illinois and against Idaho where Indiana played well. There are certain stretches where they played poorly. I'm going to ask you first, Charlie, before I get into the results. Have we seen IU play at their highest level yet?
I don't think so. I think that we've seen glimpses of what is like the potential, what's achievable for this IU offense, at least. And I think we've seen a lot of good from the IU defense. I think that there's a ceiling. I think IU's right around here. So there's room to grow.
That's right. Yeah, that's why you have to watch our YouTube streams here. At the end of the day, what Charlie is saying is that yes, there is room for improvement as far as this Indiana offense is concerned. I agree. I think, or Indiana overall is concerned. I shouldn't say offense in particular. I agree, and I think there is room for improvement in their offense. I think as I take a step back and I look at the roster overall, right? You know, Tom Allen is in his 6th season coaching Indiana football. The The interesting facet of this is that because of the transfer portal, because of players moving on to the NFL, because of players graduating and whatnot, this is almost like Tom Allen is going through the churn of a first-year head coach, right? You're seeing a lot of new pieces and a lot of new faces and a lot of new places. And yes, Tom Allen is not building the program from the ground up, but you went 2-10, and a lot of players left, and a lot of interesting players have come into your program. It's going to take a few games to get to your, stable altitude level, right? It's going to take some time. And the good news is
If
Indiana
that exists.
has 3 games. It has 3 games to get to that point, including this matchup against Western Kentucky. But again, this is a Western Kentucky team that's somewhere in between Illinois and Idaho. And you hope to see Indiana continuing to improve. As I look at the results, 88% of the voters thus far in the poll believe no, Indiana has not played their best football yet. We will still see it in the future. It is yet to come. Indiana has the benefit of the doubt to some degree from the IU fans here. Hoosier Nation thinks Indiana will be playing better here as we get into week 3 and beyond. That's how we look at this Indiana-Western Kentucky game. All 3 of us had Indiana getting the win. We'll see how it plays out on Saturday at noon at Memorial Stadium. We'll have Charlie on site. We'll have all of us here on social media, live tweeting, posting a post-game article. We'll bring you quotes live from Tom Allen's press conference when we'll be doing this podcast all over again next Monday, hopefully, with the 3-0 Indiana Hoosiers. Charlie, last week in college football was absolutely bonkers. We will be moving on to our final segment here, our Big Ten pick of the week. A bunch of games coming up this Saturday. Wisconsin's going to try to bounce back. Nebraska has a new head coach, an interim head coach as they take on Oklahoma. Purdue heads on the road to play Syracuse. Indiana with a fun game against Western Kentucky. Michael Penix Jr. and the Washington Huskies host Michigan State on Saturday night in the ABC primetime game. Charlie, as you look at the different Big Ten matchups this week, which team do you like against the spread as this Saturday comes up here with all sorts of interesting games?
I think that MSU
Ooh,
is going to come out on top.
Dang, so Washington currently a 3-point favorite, and you have the Spartans winning.
Yeah, I think that maybe it's because I want them to win. Maybe it's because I want the Big Ten to look better. But I do believe that MSU is a team that has untapped potential. We saw a little bit of it last year, and I think we're going to get a lot more of it as the season comes on. So,
ooh, that should be a good one. Can't wait to see how that plays out. As I look at the other games here on the slate, I have Auburn winning at home against Penn State. It's a 3:30 game on Saturday. I understand that Penn State's ranked right now, and Penn State looked all right in their win over Purdue in week 1 at West Lafayette. I think it's just going to be tough. I think it's going to be tough for them to win 2 road games in their first 3 matchups. In tough environments, whether it's in West Lafayette or in Auburn. And I think Auburn, SEC, it's a different animal. I think they're going to come out on top here, even though Penn State is a 3-point favorite. I like Auburn straight up. So Charlie and I feeling a couple of upsets here. No surprise when you look at the world of college football. Charlie, as we wind down on this Monday night, any final thoughts here? A lot to digest, jam-packed episode. We talked about Indiana basketball's conference release, recapped Indiana's weird win over Idaho, huge game against Western Kentucky coming up. What's on your mind here as we wrap up?
I think IU's got a lot going on. As a school's athletic program goes, I think they're focusing on basketball. The fan base at least is. I think a lot of fans are focused on Idaho still, focusing on what went wrong. I don't think enough people are focused on Western Kentucky. And Tom Allen says it best. The most important game is the next one. So got to stay focused.
And that's all Indiana can do here as they head into this Western Kentucky matchup. I'm going to say it again as I wind down here. Tom Allen, as much as it's been a little bumpy, right? 2021 was rough. Idaho's first half was rough. He still deserves your trust. He still deserves your faith. And again, I'm looking at this as objectively as possible. I've seen a lot of Indiana football, and it's been rough, at times, frequently since the start of the 2021 season. But to see how high Tom Allen took this program in 2019 and in 2020, and again, he's one of the few people on this planet who's not only willing to be the head coach at Indiana, but is also capable of doing a really good job, as we've seen in a couple different seasons. One of the few people capable of accomplishing that. Tom Allen deserves your faith. He deserves your trust. Tom Allen is 13-1 in non-conference games in the regular season, and the only loss came at home last year to a college football playoff team in Cincinnati that he was willing to schedule. By the way, he's been willing to schedule Louisville coming up, and you'll see Indiana take on Louisville the next 3 years, I believe. So that'll be interesting. He's won 16 Big Ten games in his tenure, which is the percentage in conference play, including a win earlier this year against Illinois, is much higher than his predecessors. It's hilarious to see the discrepancy between Tom Allen's Big Ten winning percentage and the previous Indiana football head coach's winning percentage. So all of you who think Tom Allen's job is in jeopardy, and all of you who think Indiana needs to change the person in charge of this program, you're wasting your breath. You're wasting your time. Not only is Indiana not doing that, it's also not a wise move at this point, at this juncture, the way things have gone this season. As I said last week, if Indiana lost to Idaho, things change. If Indiana loses to Western Kentucky, we'll keep that in mind. Overall, though, to this point, Tom Allen has not only earned this job at Indiana University, he has vastly exceeded expectations. So looking forward to seeing how Indiana faces off against Western Kentucky on Saturday. But that about wraps it up for our 263rd episode of the Hoosier Sound. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate your support, especially if you stuck to the end. To hear more fantastic episodes like the one you heard today, be sure to follow us at Indiana HQ to make sure you don't miss any in the future, or you can go to our website, indianahq.com, to find it all in one place. But as always, thank you for listening, Hoosier Nation, and we will see you next time.